This week on the other side, new Liberal Party leaders for both New South Wales and Victoria this week. Both women, both moderates, both from inner city affluent electorates. We will discuss. COVID in the rear view mirror. Have we actually learned anything from the horrors of 2020 and 21? Was the government response worse than the pandemic itself? Would we do it all the same way if it happened again in the future, God forbid? And if not, what would we do differently? Professor Gigi Foster from the University of New South Wales School of Economics and Professor James Allan from the University of Queensland Law School will join us as our special guests this week for that very important discussion. Another big show. Let's go. G'day Canberra, g'day Alice Springs, and g'day Australia. This is episode 435 of The Other Side for the weekend commencing Friday, November 21, 2025, our second last show of 2025. The Other Side's your deep dive on the important issues that matter in Australia and that affect us from around the world from a different non-left-wing perspective. We always declare our bias right up front so you know what lens we're viewing things from. We're a news commentary show and we are centre-right politically. We exist to counter what we see as a heavy centre-left bias in the Australian mainstream media to bring you the other side of debates you may not even hear on the mainstream channels. It's that time of year when we begin to wrap things up for another season. This is our second last show for 2025, and I find myself in a rather sad position of having to deliver the news that the other side won't be able to continue into 2026 in its current form. You may have heard me mention in recent shows that we needed to reach a target of 2,000 paying monthly subscribers by the end of this year to continue the show. And I want to first of all say a huge thank you to the 344 paying subscribers that we have at this point, and to everyone who's ever supported us in the past or supported our advertising sponsors. We've got almost 69,000 subscribers on YouTube and 36,000 on X. But those don't generate any revenue. They just help get the show seen and impact the YouTube algorithms, which we are completely at the mercy of. People just don't watch long-form content like ours on any other platform. Google owns YouTube, and YouTube is now television, period, in Australia pretty much, at least for almost everyone under 40 and a majority of people over 40. So in Australia, you've got to be on YouTube. You've got to be okay with YouTube to get any traction whatsoever. Our main Friday night show does pretty well, regularly gets 10,000 views, sometimes many more. And our segment clips throughout the week, they double the audience. We split the show into its 5 segments. We put them out Sunday to Thursday, and we usually get another 10 to 20,000 views on average, sometimes many times that on those. That's more than many of the mainstream media networks get on YouTube and more than some major capital city radio stations actually get on the actual radio. What's really amazing about our success, that's unlike a lot of other Aussie YouTubers, is that our audience has grown organically in under 2 years. We don't advertise, we don't boost on YouTube, and most importantly of all, our audience is 95% Australian. We've managed to get to that almost 70,000 subscriber number by sticking to Australian content. Some Australian YouTubers resort to doing mainly global content or American content to get a bigger audience, but I don't want to change that. Now, if there's one thing I absolutely hate doing, it is begging for support and begging for money. But despite us regularly showing ads in our show, telling people how you can support us, even without spending any money, we still aren't getting enough support, financial or otherwise, to keep going in our current form. At the moment, 60% of people who do watch this show are not even among the 69,000 free subscribers. They haven't even clicked the subscribe button, which costs absolutely nothing. But it's the most important thing anyone can do to support the channels that you love, because it tells the YouTube algorithm to go show the show to more people. So does clicking the like button, and making a comment sends it completely off the charts. It costs nothing, but only 40% of our audience even do that. Of the 69,000 great people who have done it, sadly, only 41, not 41,000, 41 have clicked the join button beside the subscribe button to join the channel as a member and pay us the price of a small cup of coffee each month since we set up that feature a few months ago. That's not 1% or even 0.1%, it's 0.06%. 303 other great people are funding us through our direct website, othersidetv.com.au. Out of our total YouTube and X subscriber base, that's about 0.3%. And I am very grateful. Don't get me wrong. I've never expected that people would support us with so much positivity. But sadly, a show like this costs a lot to produce. And even though we have a couple of generous benefactors and I'm working most of the time for the love of it myself, it's just not enough to keep going. But what hurts the most is looking at our like versus unlike scores and the lovely comments that so many of you do make each week. This is a controversial show. We say a lot of things. It'd be nuts for me to think that all the opinions we express on the show every year, you're not going to totally disagree with me at least a few times. But 99% of our audience are smart and they hang in anyway. Not only that, our engagement positivity is off the charts. Our like versus dislike ratio is above 99% on average. And for a show this controversial, that is really incredible. Thank you. And the words of encouragement are fantastic. The words. I don't have time to respond to a lot, but please know that those words are greatly appreciated and are what have kept us going as long as we have. But it has been 5 years since this show started as a COVID-era audio podcast. We had our year with Discernible, with that excellent platform when we went to video, our year with the former ADHTV, and our most recent 2 years independent. And it's been a lot of work, but great fun and very satisfying for an old journo and broadcaster like me to play in the new media space. So what will the future hold? We don't know right now. We've got our last show next Friday night. Then it's a bit of a break. Then I'll be working with our production crew and thinking about what form we can come back in 2026 that will make sense to everyone and match the resources that we do have. Hopefully we'll be able to do something. I hope we get a lot more support from Australia's centre-right community next year. I've got to admit that it's been hard to get guests to appear on the show, from the Liberal Party in particular in various places, something that should be a no-brainer for the right-wing voices in Australia if they were as smart and organised as the left-wing voices are at using new media platforms properly. Next week in our final show, I'll have a lot more to say about journalism and media in Australia in general and where I think it's heading and the ethics of money from the left and certain industry lobby groups affecting online content. But this week, I just want to ask our regular audience this. If you like this show and you do want to see us continue in a big way next year, could I please ask you to click the subscribe button on YouTube if you haven't? That will give us a bit of an indication. But I need you to do more than just that. I need you to go to our website, othersidetv.com.au, and actually sign up and set up for regular monthly donations. You can do this for as little as $4.50 plus GST per month. And if we don't continue into 2026, we'll let you know in February. Regular payments will stop. You won't be out of pocket for more than a few dollars. But it will give us a sense of how much money we might have in 2026 and what we can reasonably plan to do and achieve with it. Now, I hate asking for money, but we have got to get paid for what we do. And so if you think you are getting some value from this show, I do need you to give back a bit. Australia is a small market. If we were an American show, we probably could keep going like this, but not as an Aussie show focused on Aussie content, unfortunately. If going to our website is too much of a pain for you and you're watching on YouTube, the join button is right next to the subscribe button. Click that. You can also sign up as a channel member and monthly supporter. This is crunch time. This is decision time. And we need your ongoing support at a level that you feel is sustainable for you long term and reflects the value that you feel you're getting out of this show. If that's not at least a little over $1 a week, then I will sadly accept that message and accept that I probably do need to pull up stumps and head for retirement. Thanks, guys. Did you know that with a virtual private network or VPN on your computer, tablet, or phone, you can log into your favorite streaming services like Netflix from home with an internet address from anywhere in the world and watch all the shows that they offer in other countries, including stuff in different languages? And using a VPN to route all your internet traffic through a third-party server means that big corporations and big government can't spy on you. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they're the best VPN servers out there, as a viewer of the other side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/other side. That's piavpn.com/other side. It's a great service, a rock bottom price, and supporting our sponsor, you are helping to keep the other side going and growing. One of Australia's top bankers told a House of Representatives Economics Committee hearing in Canberra this week that Australia should be an energy superpower. He's dead right. He said, "We're blessed with incredible amounts of sunshine, wind resources, hydro capacity, and one of the world's largest reservoirs of natural gas. And the fact that we have a possible issue with energy is sad and should never have happened." That's National Australia Bank Chief Executive Andrew Irvine, who's stating the bleeding obvious there and what we've been saying on this show for years. Cheap energy is everything to Australia's national economic health, which means the ability to deliver social services we need for our country. And it's everything to our job creation, our productivity, our business stimulus, and our national security ultimately. Cheap energy is everything. Attack cheap energy and you weaken a nation. Irvine said higher energy costs are holding back manufacturing growth and hurting households. He says the focus should be on getting more energy into the grid by speeding up approvals for gas and renewable energy projects, which makes me wonder who's stopping us. Irvine slammed what he called the vilification of gas in Australia, pointing out that the carbon intensity of gas is much, much lower than coal. He's right again. He says the decarbonisation value of moving from coal to gas is as significant than moving from gas to renewables in terms of reducing emissions. Better to move from coal to gas than gas to renewables, or maybe even more. In my opinion, we seem to be so energy stupid in this country. It seems like someone who does not have our best interests at heart is perhaps deliberately trying to wreck us? Foreign actors, maybe? Or is it traitors in our own nation, certain people who stand to gain personally, financially from pushing renewables, wind and solar, above everything else? Never mind that gas and nuclear should be a critical part of our energy mix as we move towards decarbonisation if we think we must. Mr. Irvine thinks we should.
As a country, we need to do a much better job of getting energy to market, both renewable and natural gas, to help decarbonize the grid, get rid of the coal, and become the energy superpower that we should be. And that I believe we could have one of the world's lowest energy costs and deliver net zero and be a wonderful exhibit to the world that you can do both.
Yeah, I don't really care about that or what the world thinks. I care about jobs, healthcare, manufacturing, and national security, and our country not going broke so that we can afford Medicare and the NDIS and other social services that lefties seem to think are free somehow. As we discussed in detail on this show last week, Net Zero Australia would have net zero effect on climate change, and all any Australian government should be worried about is delivering the Australian people the cheapest energy humanly possible. And our politicians and bureaucrats are failing us dismally on that front, and it's a disgrace. The NAB CEO also told the House Economic Committee hearing that Australia's productivity crisis is due in large part to the explosion of public service jobs in the past 10 years. 9 out of 10 jobs that we are creating are in the public service. And the public service typically has lower productivity than the private sector. Andrew Irvine said that to the committee. He says governments have got to rein in spending and we've got to make way for the private business part of our economy to grow. He's right again. Australia simply cannot continue to sustain the insane level and size of government that we have. Never mind its intrusive, illiberal power. It's just too damn big and way too expensive. Too many people in this country are sucking on the teat of the taxpayers who are actually producing and are accountable to the marketplace and competition and have to perform. The NAB CEO also slammed the amount of government red tape we have. So government's not only not productive, it stops the productive part of the country from being productive with red tape. He says we've got to slash what he calls performatory legislation that adds no value to anyone but hurts small business. He told the story of a small food business that had to fork out, get this, $60,000 for a new printer. What for? To print new labels for their products. Why? Because the government changed the regulations around what size the font had to be on the labels. He said this was a business with a turnover of only around $700,000 to $800,000 a year, having to shell out $60,000 for a new printer. They could have hired a person for that or two. And this is the problem. Bureaucrats come up with some idea. They see the simple benefit. Oh, we'll make the font size bigger so people can read the label better. And because they are not in the business, because they've never run any business, and because they don't think, most of them, it ends up hurting more than it helps. There's a principle in economics and government policy making that every bureaucrat should have tattooed on their arms. You must always consider the unintended consequences of your well-meaning policies. It's not enough to play checkers. You've got to play chess. You need to think a few steps ahead. You've got to ask people what the effects of your harebrained latest ideas to improve our lives might actually be long-term. Put your bloated egos aside for a second and think. This is why nobody wants to set up a business in Australia anymore. But you see, this is the problem with government. They never suffer the consequences of the decisions they make. We do. Great news this week. Australia's going to save billions by not hosting the greenhouse gas emitting and hot air expelling COP31 conference powwow of self-indulgent climate zealots. Hooray! Instead, we're going to let Turkey hold it. We did a deal with Turkey to pull out of the race to be host. Part of the deal is that the self-loving Australian Minister for Climate, the esteemed and intellectually gigantic Chris Bowen, will be able to prance around the world stage as a climate negotiations global leader for the coming year. So with the big guy's ego sufficiently stroked, the winner is Turkey. Actually, the winner is Adelaide and all of Australia for being spared the agony of hosting this costly and pointless event. Don't let these junket-loving climate warriors get away with it. Don't they know that flying to the other side of the globe instead of having a chat on Zoom leaves a really big carbon footprint? Apparently not. It's amazing how quickly their end of the world concerns disappear when there's a free international trip and lots of nice food and accommodation and fawning to be enjoyed. Another upside for Australia is less Chris Bowen on our shores. He'll be ignoring his domestic responsibilities while jointing around being terribly globally important in his new role as COP president. The Australian newspaper reports that Bowen will not step down from his ministerial role. He will rely on the Assistant Climate Minister Josh Wilson and the Special Envoy for Climate Change, Kate Thwaites, to take on additional duties. Aussie taxpayers will be footing the bill for Big Chris's new role, but hey, it's cheaper than hosting the COP. Prime Minister Albanese says the agreement is an outstanding result for Australia. Yeah, for once, Albo, I agree with you. SmartKits Australia is a leading supplier of prefabricated home improvement kits, so you can do it yourself, save money and hassle. SmartKits Australia is the easiest way to improve your home and build memories that last forever. Buy online, customize your way, get it built. That's the SmartKits way. Decks, patios, pergolas, flyover roofs, carports, and insulated roofing, all prefabricated, fully engineered, and delivered anywhere in Australia. You can choose from hundreds of pre-designed SmartKits on their website, or you can go custom with SmartKits' in-house design team. Every kit is engineered tough, packed smart, and delivered free anywhere in Australia. And don't worry if you're not so handy. If you need it installed, they can do that too. Their licensed builder network can get you started even faster. It's up to you. So save thousands on your own 100% Australian-made Smart Kit. Build your own outdoor lifestyles with SmartKits Australia. SmartKits.com.au, a proud sponsor of The Other Side. Both New South Wales and Victoria have got new state opposition leaders this week as the Liberal Party continues to be so organised and well run and structured and aligned and close together and committed. Anyway, New South Wales Liberal Party has elected Callie Sloan on Friday morning after turfing Mark Speakman on Thursday. It's now an all-female leadership lineup in New South Wales with Natalie Ward remaining the deputy leader. Sloan is a former TV show host and journalist. She presented the Today Show for a bit on Channel 9, and she hosted the late news bulletin Nightline. She's only been in Parliament for 3 years. Between politics, that's no problem with that. We need fewer politicians, career politicians in Parliament. Between politics and television, in between, she was the CEO of a charity. So she's at least got some business management experience, even though it was a non-commercial or competitive venture. She's an inner city Liberal, the member for the affluent electorate of Vaucluse in Sydney. Sloan is a political moderate, not a conservative, and Speakman, who she ousted, was also of the moderate faction of the Liberal Party. Meanwhile, in Melbourne, the Liberals turfed a Conservative, Brad Batten, for its third state leader this year. The new leader of the Victorian Liberal Party's parliamentary wing, the opposition down there, is 35 years old. Yep, all that life experience and wisdom ready to be shared with us all. I'm sorry, but I don't think anyone under 40 should be leading any government or political party anywhere in the world. I make no apology for thinking that. You need more life experience. It doesn't matter how whip smart you are or how articulate you are. A little bit of longevity does matter. Anyway, this particular 35-year-old is whip smart and highly articulate. Her name is Jess Wilson. She's the first woman to lead the Victorian Liberals, and were she to perform a miracle and actually win government in the country's most left-wing state, actually, she has a chance because the Labor government is just so awful now that even the lefties in Victoria can see it. Wilson would become the third female Premier of Victoria, but she would be the first to be elected rather than having the job passed on to her by a departing colleague. Now, she's the MP for the upmarket inner suburban Melbourne electorate of Kew, and she was elected also just in a few years ago, 2022. She says her priorities include budget repair, tackling crime, improving healthcare access, and making housing more affordable. She's ousted, as I said, the Conservative former policeman Brad Batten from the top job just weeks before his 50th birthday. Happy birthday, Brad. He'd only had the job since last December following the demise of the previous leader, John Pizzuto. He took over following the demise of the previous leader, Matthew Guy, who lost the 2022 election. Are you following? If you're not from Victoria, you will recall John Pizzuto's downfall. That followed party conflicts over the banning of Moira Deeming from the Liberal Party room that made national headlines, and then he lost the defamation case on that drama. Mental note to new leaders, try not to shoot self in foot. Yes. His successor, Brad Batten, the Conservative, had a rocky year this year, and on Monday, a cross-factional delegation of Liberal MPs told Batten he'd lost the support of the party room and that Wilson would nominate for the leadership of the party in a spill the following morning. What's weird about all this is that just one day earlier, a poll had shown that the Liberal Party was in an election-winning position, and another recent poll had shown the same. But both polls only had Batten on 51 to 49 against Labor, not a big enough lead, it seems. Anyway, Conservatives, aren't the flavour of the month in the Liberal Party, especially in Victoria. And so it was bye-bye Brad and hello Jess on Tuesday. All right, so just how moderate and wet, as they call it, is she? Well, she was reportedly the only Victorian Liberal MP to publicly support the Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum yes vote. So that's not a good sign if you're a Conservative. But she doesn't seem too ideologically rigid. Her priorities as leader emphasise economic discipline, so that's good, especially around the hideous $200 billion state debt of Victoria. Housing affordability, she's up onto that, which is very important. Healthcare access and crime. Okay, that's a mix of classical liberal economics concerns and more centrist social policy. Her career background is on the economic side of things, so that's good. She worked for the Big Four accounting and consulting firm KPMG, and she also worked in public policy for the Business Council of Australia. And before becoming the leader, she was promoted to be the shadow treasurer, reflecting her growing role in economic policy. So she's been seen as a good economic thinker for quite some time. Her election as leader was not purely a moderate takeover. She was able to secure significant backing from Conservatives also. And according to reporting, she was elected unopposed after that spill. So check out this from her Tuesday night performance on Sky News' Peter Credlin show.
We cannot afford to lose the next election. Mm-hmm. We have to do it for Victorians. Victoria is at a crossroads, and I believe I can lead our team to the next election and ensure we get a Liberal government elected and we change course.
How is he going to lose the next election, though? Because he's the first leader you've had in almost a decade who was ahead in the polls. So if he's ahead in the polls and you're his shadow treasurer, that's a terrific team. Why change the team?
Well, what we know is we need to win 16 seats the next election. It's no easy task. Mm-hmm. The job ahead of us is mammoth. Mm-hmm. And we know that the Labor machine is already working. But Polls come and go, but to be ahead 51, 52 in the polls isn't going to deliver us the result to win the next election. We need to be well ahead in the polls. We need to see our primary vote get into the 40s, get up into the 40s to be able to actually deliver government at the next election. And I believe with the team behind me, we can do that at the next election.
Not short of confidence for a 35-year-old, that's for sure. But she is young. So why oust Brad Batten? Polls had the coalition at 51 to 49 on a two-party preferred basis, and Batten himself was well ahead of Jacinta Allan as preferred premier in the polls at 45 to 34. That was a good lead. Her elevation likely marks a strategic shift. Under Wilson, the Liberals are aiming to present a more centrist, responsible alternative to the Labor government. Her focus on debt, housing and health is very much about competence rather than cultural warfare. This could be an attempt to win back professional, urban and suburban voters who've drifted away, particularly in the affluent Melbourne areas like her own seat of Kew. And by choosing a moderate, the party may be trying to heal internal factional divisions. She'll get and keep the support of the Conservatives if she remains as tough on Victoria's soaring crime problem as Brad Batten was, and if she focuses on fiscal responsibility, getting government spending down and lowering the insane debt levels. It does sound like she's getting that message.
Debt in this state is soaring towards $200 billion, and the opportunity cost of that means that we won't be able to fund essential services. I'm 35 years old. I'm a millennial. I know that my generation and generations before younger than me have given up on trying to buy their own home. And it's the punishing property taxes in this state that is making housing unaffordable. These are the issues we need to take to the next election. I believe I can do that. I can take that broad agenda and really sell an economic narrative and a broad narrative about why the Liberal Party will be a credible economic alternative for Victoria.
A message of fiscal responsibility plus social compassion may resonate with many centrist Victorian voters, but she might struggle to differentiate the Liberals enough from Labor. If the Liberals become too centrist, voters might not see a reason to change, so she needs to watch she doesn't slide too left on social policy. Uni-party stuff won't work. And the support for the voice, rejected even in left-wing Victoria, does hang over her head. But when it comes to the fat cat bureaucrats and the massively ballooning size of government in this country that is, let's be blunt, destroying us, Victoria is the front runner. Out of every 10 new jobs created in our country, and particularly in Victoria, 9 are in government. Only 1 comes from the public sector. It's obscene. And it's where Labor and the unions and a bureaucratic leadership out of control and drunk on public money have taken that state. Jess Wilson gets that.
1 out of every 10 jobs in Victoria are now being created by the private sector. The rest, by the government. Now, that is not sustainable in any way, shape or form. But where my concern really lies is not only the fact that the wage bill has doubled since Labor came to office 10 years ago, but it's that executive level. It's the growth of that executive level that we are seeing go so quickly. And that's where I think there is opportunity to ensure we're actually directing government funding to frontline services. We have vacancies when it comes to Victoria Police during a crime crisis, 2,000 vacancies for Victoria Police. So on the one hand, we're seeing the growth in the executive level on major infrastructure projects like the SRL, but we can't see enough cops on the beat in a crime crisis.
That's the new Victorian State Liberal Party opposition leader, Jess Wilson, speaking to Peter Credlin on Sky News. I'll tell you what, if she keeps hammering that message, people will be saying yes to Jess at the 2026 election. But will people forget that when it came to the voice, she supported yes?
A lot of my viewers are watching you tonight and they remember you as someone who supported the voice, one of the few Liberals who supported the voice. Even in Victoria, the voice was defeated. Have you changed your mind there?
Well, I've been very clear about the treaty, that I oppose the treaty, and I spoke about it at length in the Parliament.
Would you repeal it?
Yes, we will repeal it.
Including anything that looks and sounds and smells like the voice in Victoria?
Yeah, I think that what I saw when I looked at the treaty in detail is something that was very vastly different to the voice. In many ways, the voice was a concept, whereas we know what the treaty actually is about. And it is vastly different in scope and in scale. And Victorians voted no to the voice, and I respect that. And that's the difference between me and Jacinta Allan, is I understand that Victorians have had a say on this, and they don't want to see the creation of a body that potentially creates a second parallel system of governance in this state that has the potential to slow down legislation. Of course, we need to ensure that we are working with Indigenous Victorians, but I'll be firmly focused on how do we close the gap, how do we deliver outcomes, and how do we do that in a transparent way.
whip smart, highly articulate, and very impressive, but I'm afraid too young, I think. Jess Wilson, the new leader of the Victorian Liberals, appearing on Sky News Australia's Credlin show this week. Did you know that with a virtual private network or VPN on your computer, tablet, or phone, you can log into your favourite streaming services like Netflix from home with an internet address from anywhere in the world and watch all the shows that they offer in other countries, including stuff in different languages? And using a VPN to route all your internet traffic through a third-party server means that big corporations and big government can't spy on you. If you sign up now with private internet access, we think they're the best VPN servers out there, as a viewer of the other side, you can get 83% off the price of your subscription and get online for less than $3 a month. Check it out right now. Go to piavpn.com/other side. That's piavpn.com/other side. It's a great service, a rock bottom price, and supporting our sponsor, you are helping to keep the other side going and growing.
You're watching The Other Side with Damian, Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month. This is The Other Side.
We had a national COVID inquiry, you may or may not recall, and it recommended clearer national leadership and a permanent public health agency, an Australian Centre for Disease Control, like the Americans, an ACDC, to coordinate responses if, God forbid, we ever had another pandemic threat. That inquiry said that early responses by our governments across Australia were too fragmented and ad hoc, that there should have been a much more centralised, single, unified approach rather than ad hoc arrangements. But that's a government view, right? And government's answer to problems caused by government tends to always be more government. A more liberal or libertarian view might be to suggest that things were too centralised and government took too much control in an environment where it knew too little and should not have been so quick to try to control the public. In practical terms, the biggest failure and stupid decision was hotel quarantine, according to the inquiry. We asked on this show way back in 2020 why our genius state governments thought it was a good idea to stick people into the equivalent of what is upright stationary cruise ships sharing centralised air conditioning. It seems pretty obvious to anyone that that would be a dumb thing to do if you don't want a virus to spread among any group of people where you reckon one or two might already be carrying it. Not obvious enough for our bureaucrats, though. And now the inquiry tells us the truth. Hotel quarantine failures were linked to major outbreaks. Oh my God. Then we had the economic failures. Schemes like JobKeeper showed the value of rapid support, but also the need for much better design, better targeting, and better evaluation afterwards so that emergency payments aren't wasteful and don't set dangerous precedents and become a moral hazard. On the public health front, we had issues with technical capacity for testing, sequencing, and data, according to the inquiry. Why weren't early tests done with a random sample of Australians to tell us exactly how much this thing was really spreading in the community? Why were TV news bulletins blaring numbers of people infected with zero context about how many more people were actually getting tested and how much more likely those people getting tested would be to test positive compared with the average citizen? The screeching dumb journalists don't know how to do statistics properly, nor do the dumb politicians we had leading us, and where were the health bureaucrats who are supposed to be scientists? So all of this, the case numbers are going up every day stuff, was just unnecessarily anxiety-inducing. And I think they wanted it that way. And finally, our civil liberties, as if they should be the last thing we consider. The pandemic also underlined the importance of balancing movement restrictions with social and economic harms, the inquiry says. The leading UK medical journal, The Lancet, says that expert reviews have now emphasized the need for proportionality and careful consideration of the unintended costs of blanket measures. But we said all that at the time and we were laughed at, or worse, we were called granny killers by the left. No, actually, it was the leftist arrogance of governments like Victoria's that led to the deaths of people in aged care. Thanks very much. So despite the inquiry, what have we really learned? And what are we doing to make sure these mistakes aren't repeated? Joining me to discuss precisely that on the other side this week as the year draws to an end and we get reflective and pensive, Professor James Allan from the University of Queensland Law School and Professor Gigi Foster from the University of New South Wales Economics School. Gigi, I'll start with you on this topic because you were right in the thick of it at the time, warning people that we were making some pretty obvious mistakes and you were being ignored and criticised for it in some quarters, if I recall correctly. But you were right. Congratulations, you were right.
Thank you. I mean, I wish I'd hear that from more people, but it isn't really something people are comfortable saying. Thank you. Sorry, you were right. I was wrong. Maybe we should, read your books. No, that's not something that's happened much. Yeah, I mean, you summarized it well in your intro. I think we were saying so many of these things, and it was so obvious, not just that, we didn't have enough information or we didn't have enough resources. It was actually that we were just blowing those whole things so far out of proportion and ignoring so many things that matter in normal times. And we have therefore created lots of crises that we didn't have previously. I mean, we've talked about the cancers that weren't found during the lockdown period, the mental health problems in the lockdowns. We literally made people less healthy by locking them down. Lockdowns have never been a proven health measure. In fact, I have a paper now, I think a year or two old now, with Sanjeev Sablock and Jay Bhattacharya and Paul Freiders and another one or two people, which is about the failure of quarantines over the history of humanity. And they were known to not work as early as the mid-1900s. In fact, it was the sanitarian movement back then in the UK, which gave rise to the UK Public Health Act in 1848. And that thing is the thing that redirected the focus of public health authorities towards simple measures like hygiene, basically having sewers, having clean water, having cleanliness in general, not too clean, but clean enough. That is also what triggered the increase in human longevity that we see in every graph you've ever seen about human longevity. It starts going up in 1850. So we just were completely misguided. We forgot all of that knowledge. And honestly, I don't think that the move towards the ACDC is the right direction at all. I don't think we've learned anything at the levels of power and authority that matter. And I think, unfortunately, we are just as primed, if of a very nasty thing that we are primed to be scared of rises again. I think we're primed to do, unfortunately, many of the same mistakes.
Okay, so you don't think we've really learned our lesson in a serious sense. James, creating an Australian Centre for Disease Control seems to be the first thing that they've done. The other thing is state governments reworking their quarantine playbooks and paying more attention to things that, I guess, sort of in the line of what Gigi was mentioning, to ventilation, to staffing, to PPE, clearer accountability when using hotels or other facilities. But that process varies by state. That needs a lot of ongoing investment, according to the Hotel Quarantine Review report from the Prime Minister's office. So there's all these. There's that awareness, I guess, that quarantine wasn't the right thing, as Gigi said, in the way that was done. That it would have been better to have other things happening. But I don't get the feeling that they wouldn't just do exactly the same thing again next time, if there is a next time.
Well, it's premised on locking down again and playing around at the margins. Look, they knew before 2020, they had the WHO and Britain had done a study of 100 years, going back to before the First World War, and they knew not to lock down. And that was the playbook based on a century of data. And in 4 weeks, they decided to copy the Communist Politburo of China. And based on nothing except panic. And the excuse you'll get is something like, well, we were uncertain what was happening. But look, no public policy person thinks, or they didn't used to think, it's a good idea. In the face of uncertainty, you don't run to the most brutal, illiberal response you can think of. What you do is you carry on and you try to change things at the margin. We knew from the Diamond Princess that only old people were really at threat. So they knew that in March 2020. That's when Ramesh and I, and then we met Gigi later. There was no data for what they did. And you say, well, they weren't very good with stats. Well, they copied the professor from Imperial College who had gotten BSE wrong. So mad cow disease. He was wrong by orders of magnitude. He got foot and mouth disease wrong. And he comes out with this. So they listened to modelers. They just ignored data and they listened to modelers. Yep. And so this is our problem. And, we have a governor of Queensland who was high up. The public health people discredited themselves. And Gigi's right. You don't expect politicians to say they're sorry until they've left office because it'll affect their career. Now, they should, but they won't. And you have to remember, this was brought to you nationally by a Liberal government. There wasn't a single person who left cabinet saying this was thuggery. There were one or two in Britain who said this is crazy, to Boris Johnson, a supposed libertarian sort of. So the political class failed us. For what it's worth, I will say that there isn't a single instance anywhere in the world where you can point to a Bill of Rights where the judges use the Bill of Rights to, ameliorate any of these regulations. So bills of rights completely worthless. The biggest inroads on our civil liberties in 200-300 years. And they did not.
Daniel Andrews used those emergency laws and just ran roughshod over any of the considerations and safeguards that were existed.
It was a weird combination. And we'll go back to Gigi, but it was a weird combination of the press acting like fear-mongering sort of exponents of the most brutal lockdowns ever, and politicians who didn't pay any of the costs. The problem is the people who imposed the rules didn't pay the cost. They got to go to work. They were picked up in chauffeur cars. They got extra power. Life was pretty good for them. They didn't lose their salary. And ironically, for a right-of-center Liberal government, the bureaucracy was fine. They got to work from home. Another problem that Gigi will mention, working from home, we can't get out of it now because people feel like it's an entitlement. Australia's productivity is tanking. It's one of the worst in the OECD.
Our biggest economic problem.
I wonder why.
Yep.
Josh Frydenberg was more profligate than any Labour treasurer. Yep. And the problems are myriad. When people pointed this out, it was, we're focused on. There was this great cartoon in the early days where they showed heaven and they had, people lining up for the heart disease and cancer. And then there's this basically empty line for COVID with a red carpet. And we were focused on deaths from COVID, which were all, the way they count it was a lie anyway. So it was like this mental infection.
Well, it was, and it was global. That's the other thing, wasn't it, Gigi? We were pretty bad, but we weren't the worst. There were plenty of places around the world.
Melbourne was amongst the worst cities, definitely.
Yes.
But certainly, there are plenty of other Western countries that completely lost their heads. And it was very much a virus that went around the world. And I'll tell you, the people who didn't catch the virus are the people who didn't have televisions, basically who already had their local groups, usually local, or some kind of thematic group that they belonged to and believed and were secure in, and they just didn't get scared. So like the Amish, for example. COVID didn't happen to the Amish, right? Just didn't happen. And it's because they just weren't connected with the rest of the communities around them. And I know the Amish, they're right there in, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the whole area where I grew up. And they just sailed through the whole COVID period. And they did sensible things. They did things that, as James said, we've known for decades, generations, are helpful when you're dealing with an infectious respiratory virus. Things like getting sunshine and having plenty of water and maybe using saltwater gargles and vitamin D supplementation. Of course, we found out many other things too, like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, proning. Remember proning? I remember that in April 2020. We discovered these things, but the governments around the world, including Australia, suppressed these kinds of early treatments. And that was another one of the egregious ethical failures that we had. Instead of empowering experimentation, innovation at the coalface with people who were seeing what was going on, bureaucrats decided to suppress all of that. And of course, that's where advance comes from, right? It comes from innovation at the coalface. Bureaucrats suppressed that and instead made these judgment calls in areas that they had really no knowledge of. And they were developing one-size-fits-all policies, running roughshod over the local needs that were driving people to try different things. And that's why we didn't hear about a lot of early treatment. In fact, it was illegal to prescribe ivermectin. Some doctors lost their license for doing so.
I'm not even sure we can still say it on YouTube without this video being suppressed.
I think we need to take a second here and congratulate the one country that did do the right thing, which was Sweden.
Yeah.
Sweden.
And Anders Tegnell should get the Nobel Prize for he won't.
100%.
But he just said, I'm looking at the data and I'm following the plan that the WHO in Britain had. And if you look at the last time I looked, Gigi will know the facts more recently, but they have the second lowest excess deaths in Europe per capita. So,
Right.
so this and they had a good flu season the year before, so there was a lot of dry timber for them. So Sweden, if you compare like with like, came out of it at least as well as anywhere else. Florida, another good example. I mean, DeSantis locked down for about 2 weeks and then actually had the courage to pull out. Nobody else did. Well, he looks better than California. He looks better than New York. And they had a lot of old people in New York. Or,
Yeah, I
sorry,
don't
in
feel like
Florida.
there's an admission. There's no admission of
no.
we got it wrong. We need to do better. We learned and we're sorry. And there's none of that. It's just tweak, tweak, tweak. The third thing is the Treasury. The three things that they're doing. So we talked about creating the Australian CDC. Questionable whether that's going to help centralising decision making even more. I don't know if that's going to help. State governments reworking their quarantine playbooks. Well, if they hadn't changed them in the first place, it would have been fine the way they were. The original playbooks were actually right. The crisis management manuals, just they tossed them out and followed China, as you said.
Based on 4 weeks of no data and models.
Well, yeah.
It's
And then the
crazy.
third thing they're doing, the only thing that they seem to be doing is the Treasury Department's refining rapid economic response mechanisms and reviewing things like JobKeeper so that future ones can be quicker, more targeted and auditable. They won't be, they probably, the cost though will still be there. We'll still be paying for it 5 years later like we are now. I don't really see anything there that's really, significant change of mindset or deals with the actual problems that we had of. One of the things that shocked me the most, Gigi, and I'm an MBA. I've got no medical background. I come from a bit of a medical family, but I don't have any background really in medicine. I studied statistics. As a journalist, I was looking at journalism is trash in this country, but I was looking at the nightly news and seeing these numbers, COVID cases going up today with absolutely zero context whatsoever.
Nothing.
Obviously, if you're taking a sample of people who are moving towards you to go and get tested, they're already people who have self-selected as potentially ill, right? So firstly, you've got a skewed sample. Secondly, so there's no randomness. So where was the random sampling? Where was we'll take 1,000 test kits out and do a random sample so we know exactly the penetration? That is science 101. How could how did that not happen?
Look,
I never understood.
It's because of the fear. Again, it's the fear that was the initial, that's why we called our book The Great COVID Panic, right? Because the panic aspect was the thing that catapulted us into this absolute insanity. And it was the political imperative that developed from the fear that the populations had that then propelled us into the stupidity of various policies we've been discussing for 2.5 years. We're still on it, actually. The ACDC is another insane policy. So it really is emotionally driven. It's just that when people are petrified of something, everything goes out the window. And that's why I say we're primed for having the same response, because if we get scared again, we'll have the same response. And the people who never got that priming, that petrification priming, like the Amish, they just didn't have a problem. And so, and the reason why we're not going to see a real admission that, oh yeah, we got these things seriously wrong, is because the problem's too big. I mean, it's just too big of a mistake. It's like the too big to fail argument, but in the case of essentially political status and reputation. I think that there is a genuine worry by the people who were in charge at the time and those who are still in our parties, our political parties here, that if they were to admit the scale of their mistakes during the COVID era and the scale of the damage that they've done to this country, they may destabilize the very country itself.
Well, or they would face personal legal risk, right?
And Gigi, the fear didn't just grow up by itself. The press and the government encouraged the fear.
Yeah.
And they made stuff up. Like there was no evidence for this, the 6-foot rule. They just plucked that out of thin air. And masks, there's still to this day, there's almost zero evidence that masks work, but it's a nice way to make people feel like, they're protecting themselves. It was a coordinated, and we know this from the Telegraph Twitter files of Hancock, that they were just trying to scare people because they didn't know what to do. And
yes, if you separate people, if you reduce obviously that's going to work to some extent. The question is
No, I don't think it's going to work at all with a virus. It's just, it's going to get around.
Well, spit.
I mean, So the question is really, what can you do? And again, if I go back to the sanitarians, the main issue that they addressed is the load of the pathogens. So bacterial viral load. When you clean things, you reduce the load. You don't take it to zero, but you reduce the load. So in that sense, yes, it's safer probably for you to visit with your grandmother outside than inside if you are sneezing all over her. It's probably safer. Right, yeah. Probably gonna, you basically just want to lower the load, but you also have to be giving her vitamin D supplementations, giving her saltwater nasal sprays. By the way, a vaccine intramuscularly is never going to protect against a nasally acquired, respiratory infection, right? That's just never going to happen anyway. So, there are things we can practically do to just
Why not,
reduce the
Gigi?
load of the pathogen.
Why would that not help?
Because it's going into your bloodstream. It's going into a part of your body.
That's
which is
connected
not
to your
where the
immune
initial
system.
Attack happens.
That's
right? The
connected
initial
to-
attack happens in your nose. So you want to kill the stuff in your nose if you can. Or
Oh, I
your
see.
throat.
Okay, all right. You're talking about the initial
That's the
attack.
first place that it goes. Only if it goes into your, further. If you basically don't have that healthy immunity, like if you're young and healthy, you're going to probably just, get rid of the infection
Right.
before it even makes you sick.
So here's something that bugs me. The entire focus is on let's lower deaths by COVID. Nobody says there's a lot of grandparents who want to see their grandkids and they don't care. Literally don't care if it gets them an extra 2 months of living. They don't want to die by themselves in a hotel.
No.
People were taking the choice away from people
Yep.
and putting it with bureaucrats.
Yep.
They didn't bear any of the costs. So, and the civil liberties infringements were huge. And again, nobody seemed to care. And going back to the economy, I'm a conservative. It was the biggest wealth transfer from poor to rich.
Yep.
And from young to old, because it was massive money printing and asset inflation. And who has assets? Well, you do, Damian, and I do. We've got houses, but young kids. So we got this massive hit of wealth. So no wonder young people are mad. So it was the best 2 years ever to be a billionaire. It was infuriating on every level, and the costs are there everywhere. And it's very.
And the young paid the biggest cost, the biggest price, not just
educational standards.
economically,
We were
but
below
socially.
Kazakhstan before the lockdowns, and now nobody wants to talk about how bad Australian educational results are.
No,
Yeah,
terrible.
They're
I
terrible.
totally agree. And by the way, I have to give a plug for the Australians for Science and Freedom Conference this weekend. We have
Yes.
a huge focus on education, exactly because of what James is saying. We've seen major problems from K through university. So we'll be talking about how to reform Australia's education systems and the systems in the West more generally.
Okay, so join us at the Australians for Science and Freedom Conference in Sydney this weekend, if you can. I think late tickets are still available, so please get onto that. I'll be speaking. Gigi obviously will be there, so lots going on there. Gigi, thanks very much. We're going to come back in a moment, have a little bit more talk about some other news. Stay with us. A great way to support the other side is to support our sponsors like SmartKits Australia, the best supplier of do-it-yourself prefab home renovation kits. And it's not just carports. SmartKits do decks, patios and pergolas, flyover roofs and insulated roofing too. All prefabricated, fully engineered and delivered anywhere in Australia. And if you're not too handy, they'll install it for you too. Get onto it. smartkits.com.au. Everybody's favourite Australian bureaucrat, the extremely well-paid head of the E-Safety Commission, Julie Inman-Grant, has been called upon by a very well-known and popular Republican politician in America to appear before the US Congress for questioning. The US House of Reps member and Judiciary Committee Chairman, Jim Jordan, who many of you who keep across liberty-related and conservative issues online will know from his many terrific efforts championing causes of freedom. He's written to Ms. Inman-Grant this week asking her to testify in a committee hearing and giving her 2 weeks to respond. He's accused her of being a zealot who's threatening American free speech. Good on him. Now, Jim Jordan has probably no power to command Julie Inman-Grant to appear, I don't think. I'm not actually sure because she's a dual citizen of both Australia and the United States, so I don't know what power that gives the US Congress and laws of subpoena over her. But he says that it's the effect that she's having on the United States that's his main concern. He pointed to her attempt to force Elon Musk and the X platform to take down videos, and he accused her of colluding with pro-censorship entities in the United States. My esteemed guests this week are Professor James Allan from the University of Queensland Law School and Professor Gigi Foster from the University of New South Wales Economics School. James, to you firstly on this one. She's a US citizen. Could they, as far as you know, actually force her to appear?
Well, Australia is not going to extradite her. So if you go to a country that won't extradite, like Polanski, the film director, accused of rape, he's been in France now for decades and decades. So if the country won't extradite you, you're safe. Okay. We're not going to extradite her for something like this. But the other hand, she has to go back there. She's presumably got family. I don't think, in a technical legal sense, she's going to be forced to go back. But on the other hand, she's probably thinking maybe I should go back. I don't know what's going to happen on that front. I will point out that my concern is not so much American free speech, it's Australian free speech, which is far, far worse than American free speech. She's a disaster, appointed by the Liberals. The Liberal Party purports to be a party of individual freedom, and they have completely collapsed on the issue of free speech. Going back to the collapse of trying to get rid of Section 18C hate speech, we had Morrison saying that, free speech had never created a single job, which is patently false. Free speech has created many jobs by having open inquiry and
innovation.
And they can't help themselves. I mean,
No.
they were supporting, going into the last election, Peter Dutton was supporting this woman.
No, it's because the left have
hopeless.
captured the culture, and the left say this is a bad thing, and then it puts the Liberals in a
But when
position
you
where
fight,
if they
you win. When
yeah,
you fight,
that's
you
right.
win. This
They
is what
don't
we're seeing
fight.
in Britain. We're seeing it in Canada with Poilievre. They don't fight on anything. But on free speech, liberty issues, it's really bad. And she is a disaster. She does try to censor things, and it's always predictably things that left of center people would want censored, not right of center people. And why we have her in this office, any smart kid is going to get around this. I mean, I get my kids to help me with IT stuff. I don't know what the hell's going on, but they will get around this in 20 seconds. 20 seconds. I mean, Gigi can back me up. Do you think they're going to have a problem?
No, they're not.
No,
It's
they're
ridiculous.
not. It's ridiculous.
What's your take on it all, Gigi? Do you think?
Yeah. I mean, we were having dinner last night at this the pre-ASF conference dinner with some of the directors, and one person said, you could get around this by going and getting a Guy Fawkes costume mask from the store.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There will be plenty of technical workarounds, and again, it's just displaying the consequences of this very unfortunate attitude, which is that if we perceive that we have a problem that can be credibly linked at some shallow level to something that everybody cares about, which in this case is child safety, then all manner of government overreach can now be justified. And it's justified without any need to connect the action to the actual desired outcome. So nobody has really proven on any sort of logical or rational or scientific basis that there is actually going to be a connection between child safety, which is the thing we're being sold this is for, and doing this action of, radically imposing things in our ways of interacting online. I've never seen it, and nobody's even asking for it. Nobody's giving it, and nobody's asking for it. So to me, that's the failure. There's a lack of kind of, in some sense, pride or self-defense in the Australian people, where they don't request and demand evidence that the proposals that the government is giving them are actually credibly connected to the things that they say, that says on the package that they're trying to do.
Well, I think there's a tranche of people who do that, but they're just not represented in the legacy media. I mean, there's definitely, we know a lot of people who are incandescently angry about this, but it will never show up on the ABC or 9 or 7. And that's why the legacy media is in disrepute. I mean, the polls show it.
Well, that's why we do this show. That's why we do this show.
That's
but we're now in a bit of peril ourselves in terms of being able to continue next year in the form that we're in. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard to counter all of this. There isn't much of a voice. Jim Jordan's letter said this. I'll just read you a little bit more of his letter because it's so enjoyable. Your expansive interpretation and enforcement of Australia's Online Safety Act, including your claim of extraterritorial jurisdiction to censor speech outside of Australia, directly threatens American speech. Nine Media reports that Jim Jordan's accusation of collusion was apparently sparked by a keynote speech that Inman Grant made at Stanford University in California in September, and work she's done with Stanford's social media lab on how to implement social media laws. It's no secret, guys, is it, that Australia is a bit of a test case. There's 3 countries, I think, Ireland, Australia, and one other. But Julie Inman Grant is there to drive this through as a kind of global test case. If this works in Australia, it's going to roll out, EU at least, if not.
But it's not going to work in the U.S. And isn't it sad that Australian free speech is basically being protected to some extent in the U.S. because it's certainly not our Liberal Party who is. They're coming up with these ideas, handing them over to Labor, who just makes them worse. So it's.
But you got a U.S. congressman saying she's a threat to the United States. Well, then she's definitely a threat to Australia.
A threat to us. And she wanted to take down. Came to my attention when she wanted to take down that video clip of the Muslim attacking the I think he was Greek Orthodox, or he might have been Syrian Orthodox bishop.
It was some unusual Orthodox,
maybe he's a
Bishop Murray,
Christian or
Bishop
something.
Murray. Yeah.
No, why shouldn't this was factual? This is not an opinion. This was dead fact. She has no business blocking people from seeing, and we all know why she did it. It's because to a certain extent, multiculturalism has been a failure, and the politicians who brought us multiculturalism cannot wear the costs of some of those failures. But we live in we're supposed to live in a John Stuart Mill world where there's a cauldron of competing views, and you don't censor facts.
Let's talk about the Liberal Party then to finish off. Just quickly, Gigi, do you want to get a word in before we move on to another topic?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I have James' opinion about this. I basically think both of the big parties are pretty useless. I think that the move towards career politicians that we now have, got the full fruits of has really, really not served Australia well. And of course, all what we used to call the freedom-friendly minor parties, back in the May 2022 election, I think that was what they were being called. They're still trying to get their act together. We still
but the people didn't support them. The people don't support. The people are the problem in Australia. That's my conclusion. I hate to say
Absolutely.
it, but it's not the politicians. It's not the media. You can't sit there, and we can't sit here. I've sat here for 5 years blaming the pollies and the media.
Yeah.
The reality is most of our fellow Australians, not the ones watching this show, but most of our fellow Australians are ignorant or left-wing or both.
There is a slight problem with our voting system. I mean, we have preferential voting that only Nauru has, and it is a protection racket for the two main parties. I mean, it's very hard to be an insurgent small party with preferential voting, and the two big parties aren't going to get rid of it. So it is harder here.
Thoughts quickly. We've got a new Victorian State Liberal Party leader, Jess Wilson, a moderate, only 35 years old. We've probably, at the time of recording this, we're not 100% sure, but we're 99% sure that in New South Wales, we're going to see a woman who's in her 50s at least. She's got some life experience, but she's also a moderate, taking over from a moderate. This is politics in Australia, right? I mean, it's you get to vote choose between the left and the left.
Well, I'll just tell you about the woman in Victoria. She was for the voice. She was the only Liberal MP who was explicitly for the voice. She was in favor of the treaty. She sided with John Pasuto over more redeeming on that whole entire fiasco. So I don't think I share a single sort of foundational instinct with her. Now, she's smart. She worked for Frydenberg, who was the most profligate Liberal treasurer.
James, she's 35 years old. You can be super smart, but she's 35. But God help us.
She's come out and she's recanted. But what matters in life are people's instincts and their courage and their actions. Talk is cheap. Anybody can say that. We know that her instinct is to support racial division. Her instinct is to support men and women's sports and women's prisons. It's bizarre, that whole thing. So I think she's a disaster. Now,
she's an inner city Liberal from Kew.
Right? The other side of the
and the New South Wales one is an inner city Liberal.
Now she's running against the worst government in the democratic world. So presumably she has a chance to win because the Victorian Labor government is the worst.
Yes, she'll win.
She has a chance to win, but they could blow it.
They could blow it.
It's
very possible in Victoria.
They're just worthless.
There are a lot of socialists out there. I don't know if they're more socialist than the rest of the
they're in the Liberal Party.
Yeah, that's right. Gigi, sorry. Thoughts on... You're in New South Wales, so you tell us how you feel about...
I honestly, I'm more apolitical than the two of you. I'm just so sick of all of the abuse from both sides of politics. And what I like to see is when actual Australians, real people, from the streets come and actually make their voices heard. And we have seen an increasing number of marches. There's going to be another one in later this month, I think the 29th of November here in Sydney, another 30th of November in Melbourne. And we've seen this whole series of them since, I think, late August, asking for, I even spoken one that was against corruption. It was basically saying we are against corruption in Australia. And it's a unifying message. It's as James said, you want to stay away from anything divisive. There's nothing about hate in any of these marches that I've seen anyway. It's very much about, no, we need to resuscitate the voice of the people in the decision-making by the apparatus of state. And that's what's missing. It's missing on both sides of politics. So I would prefer to basically have an alternative. Instead of hoping that the Liberals win, I actually don't really care which major party wins. I think really what we need to do is show them how badly they've governed us for probably more than a decade now, certainly probably going back much further, and how much we actually need to be listened to. So the people need to actually rise up and say, enough is enough. We're not going to be abused anymore. And that's what's happening with these marches. So, I like to support those.
Yeah, good. Well said. We should support them. Australians for Science and Freedom, the conference Your annual conference is happening this weekend in Sydney. I'm very happy to be on one of the panels and having a speech.
Super exciting.
Lots of other good people coming on. Adam Crichton from the IPA, former News Corp economics journalist, one of the few conservative journalists in the country he was.
Yep.
Obviously can't work in journalism anymore if you like the rest of us. There's no
He'll
jobs
be
for
just
us.
back from Argentina, actually. He just got back from meeting with Millet. So
Oh,
we have a
wow.
very
Okay.
cool thing in store there. Also, Chris Kenny, whose show I'm often on at Sky News, he'll be in the same session on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And we also have a session we're actually kicking off with an Indigenous advancement session featuring Warren Mundine and Anthony Dillon, Gary Johns, Peter Pham. So really, really exciting lineup of people, and about 30 books for sale. So if anybody wants to just come by, it's at UNSW's campus here. UNSW is giving us the venue for free. Thank you very much, my employer. And so it's running all day Saturday and Sunday. People are welcome to go on scienceandfreedom.org. They can still find tickets.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that from UNSW. That's
I'm
where
stunned.
where I studied.
Do
so,
they know
yeah.
who's using the venue?
Look, I'm walking a fine line, James.
Well done, Gigi. Well done. You hang in there now.
That's right.
We're not going to, we won't go there. All right. Thank you very much. Both of you. We're talking about University of Queensland later, James, on another day. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for
Yeah,
coming on
nice to see Gigi,
throughout
too.
2025. And Gigi, we look forward to seeing you next year, hopefully, too. And I'll catch you on the weekend.
Look, I was the eye candy today, so
You were the eye candy today, right in the middle there.
yeah.
Thanks, Pro. Thanks
You
very
got it.
much for having me on.
And that is all for this episode of The Other Side, your analysis of the best news and commentary without the woke. We will be back with our episode 436, our last show for 2025, next Friday, November 28. Can you believe it? Christmas is weeks away, merely weeks away. Clips from the show are going to be dropping throughout the week as usual on our YouTube, X and Rumble channels. And remember, as I said at the start of the show, it is crunch time for The Other Side. If you like what you see, please do support us. Go to our website at othersidetv.com.au. Sign up to the exclusive side for only a fraction more than $1 a week. So cheap. Or you can subscribe right now on YouTube if that's where you watch. Simply press the join button beside the subscribe button down below. It is that easy. No point in whinging about the state of the country unless you're prepared to do something about it, I say. Then we will be able to plan and actually see if we can return and in what form in 2026. I'm Damian Curry. Bye for now.
The Other Side with Damian Curry is Australia's best independent news commentary show, bringing you up to speed on the issues that matter most. Simply subscribe for free on YouTube by hitting the subscribe button and bell, so you'll be notified whenever we post anything. And to really stay in touch, check out our independent website at othersidetv.com.au. You can sign up for free there too, or join the exclusive side and help support our show for less than $5 a month.